Hi, my name's Tom Ollerton, and this is the Shiny New Object podcast. This is a podcast about new marketing technology, and every week I have the pleasure of interviewing someone from our industry who's interesting, influential, or just a top bloke. And this week is no different. We have Adam Boita, who is the head of marketing at Pernod Ricard UK across the Absolut and Jameson brands. I actually reconnected with Adam recently. We met when I was working at We Are Social, but we met accidentally on a WhatsApp group called the Forest Gate Dads. We both live in Forest Gate, and I'm now a dad. If my daughter kicks off upstairs, then that's what happens there. But it's been really good to reconnect with Adam kind of via WhatsApp. So Adam, for those of the listeners who don't know who you are or aren't aware of your work, can you tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Boita, head of marketing at Pernod Ricard. I have the absolute pleasure of working across amazing brands, including Absolut and Jameson, but I've also previously worked across other brands in the amazing portfolio we have, which includes Beefeater Gin, Plymouth Gin, Monkey 47, some of our tequila brands, Malibu Rum, Havana Club, to name but a few. And I guess I'm a marketer that tries to blend culture with tech, underpinned by really, really strong consumer insights, because at the end of the day it's the consumer at the end of all of the journeys that we take them on in terms of our marketing and advertising communications.
And actually we first met through doing an event. It was AdTech, wasn't it?
Yeah. AdTech in Shoreditch Old Town Hall. And
we did that sort of nauseating things like a fireside chat.
Yes. You were subbed in late doors. Yeah.
What are you talking about? I was the first and only choice, as I'm sure how everyone remembers it. But I was really kind of struck at the time by how kind of broad an experience you had in innovation. Like, you've done lots of on pack innovation across the bottlenecks, and you've done
the QR codes and the NFC tags on some of the bottles, like Malibu, for example.
And you'd also done kind of 4-dimension virtuality stuff where you talk. Can you talk a bit about that work?
Yeah, we've done some work with Havana Club, with an agency called Studio Output, and they have a division called Found Studio, which is which handles all their kind of VR work. And it was the first time that I'd seen VR actually mapped in the real world. So the idea is that you walk into a kind of set, and you see the set in front of you, and then you put on your kind of VR goggles, Oculus, and the same world is there but recreated in VR, and then things start happening to the objects which were previously sedentary, and that took us down a great road of allowing us to imagine Havana throughout the ages, and the kind of role that Havana Club played within that, all told through the eyes of a kind of bartender, and you saw his space change throughout the years as Havana indeed also changed. And it was a really nice way to get across the Cuban culture without necessarily needing to go to Cuba, whilst also educating people about the rum and the great cocktails, obviously including the mojito that Havana Club's famous for.
And so how do you justify the expense of something like that to the business? Because you're obviously a fan of innovation, you're mad keen about technology, and you have the privilege of being a head of marketing. But in my experience as an agency person trying to encourage brands to do innovative stuff using new technology like an Oculus, it's always a nightmare selling that in. So have you led the charge on new technologies like VR, or has that come from somewhere else in the business?
I think what we've always tried to ensure is that we think about the experience and the quality of the experience, and then how you can amplify that. So we used to have a model, and we still do, called the Boita model, where we kind of think about people coming into the funnel, so into the experience. It can be a small amount of influential people going through that experience, and then taking the content that was created at that experience and then amplifying it out after the event to kind of create a longer tail to that. So you said justify to the business. Well, actually, I think that's just a new model of doing communications. It's not necessarily the amount of people that you get through the door. It's the amount of quality people you get through that door, having an amazing experience, and then taking that experience, making sure that there are Instagrammable and social media moments within that space that they can then capture and record and then share on their social network, so that actually, you may have had only 200 people go through that experience, but that was the cool new experience of that week to visit in London. And it was created by Havana Club. We also pulled in cultural curators, so Dom's cool Latique from kind of Street Feast. We had Ben Ein, who actually went over to Cuba along with Dom, got some inspiration, and then created a piece which we then sold off for his charity. So we pulled in these other collaborators as well to help us with that overall quality of experience.
And where did the bow tie model come from? Is that one of yours, or have you swiped
it just looks like a bow tie when you kind of do a kind of like side on funnel, a little kind of experience, which is the the circle in the middle and then the funnel going out.
Right. So let's jump to the getting to know you questions. Okay. So what is the marketing book you'd recommend most often?
There was actually two. The first one was The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. Just fascinating the way that he thought about how to create passive income, but B, also how you can automate services through the likes of virtual PAs, through the use of software and technical.
A VA.
I haven't. You know what? I really do actually want to, because I know one of my good friends actually uses it for stuff like booking holidays, Christmas presents. $15 an hour, I think. Or £15 an hour, depending on which service you use. And you know what? When Tim Ferriss must have written that, at least 10 to 10 years ago. And people are now still talking about online virtual assistants. Some of these guys have, literally degrees from Harvard or, the Open University, and they're earning obviously a good coin helping out other people. So
yeah, I love the idea, but I hate the idea of the setup. Like the finding that person, running a bunch of tests. You're like, could you organise my Saturday for me? And then you got to pay for that. And then there's services that find those people for you. And then the price starts to escalate.
I also find people people think, it's just going to take the problem away. But actually, it's just like anything. You've got to write a really, really good brief, be really detailed. What outputs do you want? It's almost the same thing as managing an agency, but just managing a virtual PA. So
I ran into. Mark Adams for the innovation
director of Vice.
Yeah,
I know Mark well.
And as usual, you run into him and he's like over the moon that he sees you. But let's definitely meet
That's
up.
Mark. Mover and shaker.
Yeah, and he and it never goes from there. But he said let's catch up, and I said, well, okay, let's catch up kind of next Wednesday. And he pulled out WhatsApp and he went, Wednesday, Old Street, Tom Hollerton, sort it out. And it went off to like his VA in wherever. And
well, he does have a executive assistant as well. I know that for sure. It appears as though it's like a kind of virtual thing coming back, but yeah, it automatically sends it to her to book in.
I think it's a he. But
is
anyway,
it? It's like EA at Mark Adams or something at gmail.com. It's like a executive assistant that kind of.
Yeah,
it'd be all right. It's kind of uncanny valley. You're not sure if it's a real person or not, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah, and after that, I was like, no, I'm going to sort this out. And I wrote to his EA and said, could you work for me as well? and the EA was like, yeah, sure, but I'm like crazy expensive. 4-Hour Workweek. I read that 6 years ago, and that was really influential to me as well. But like, what stuff do you use now from that book?
I thought some of it was slightly shady, but I guess at the time it probably felt like that. But actually now a lot of the things he's talking about are actually now commonplace, and I guess that's always the thing with new tech and new shiny new toys, is that at the time they seem bizarre and you're not really sure exactly how to wrap your head around them. But actually, why not just try some of the things in there? So. About 6 years ago, before I joined Pernod, I set up I'm a surfer, and I'm on the beach with my friend. I'm like, where are we going to hide our valuables? And he was like, I don't know. And in the end, I came up with the fact that, why don't we hollow out a suntan cream bottle and hide our valuables in there? And I was like, actually, do you know what? I'm going to go and make that and sell that as a product. And I was reading, we were in Sri Lanka at the time, and I was reading that, and a lot of the processes and in terms of setting up things and how to kind of start a kind of side business like that came to fruition, and I used a lot of the techniques there in terms of invoicing, warehousing, processing, and actually to the point where it got so automated that I don't really have to think about it anymore. It's just in the evening or on the weekend I can just send an invoice out. It's connected to my warehouse.
And what's it called?
TanSafe.
TanSafe, and it's an empty fake
suntan cream bottle, that you can hide your valuables in on the beach.
And it makes money.
It does, yeah.
Pays for Christmas type of money?
It definitely pays for a few good holidays a year, I can tell you that.
Really?
Yeah.
And have you done other like spin-offs?
Not so far, no. TanSafe just is a nice passive income that kind of takes care of itself now.
That is very impressive. You're one of the few people who rave on about the 4-hour work week, but I've actually done it as well. So you'd recommend that as a marketing book?
Rework was also another good one.
Rework's amazing.
Yeah.
23 Signals.
And I read that on a plane, literally cover to cover in the space of about an hour and a half, I think. It is a page turner, which I find a lot of marketing books aren't, which is an absolute pleasure when they are. And it just got me thinking about just different ways to kind of view things and processes and timings and how you order your day and how you write your to-do list, all those kind of things. So I think it's still as valid today as was it then.
Yeah, I read it for the second time recently, and for the benefit of the people who haven't read the book, one of the things that really stuck with me was the idea that there's not very many people work for Basecamp, they're now called, or
Basecamp, it's like Slack and all that kind of stuff, isn't it?
At the time of writing the book, I think they had like 24 people that worked for them, but they all worked in different parts around the world, but they were only all online for 3 hours every day. So that's when they'd do all the meetings and make all the decisions, and then they'd have sort of 4 hours either side of that, either straight after that or before that. And I just thought, what a brilliant idea that they naturally segregate that solo working time with the collaborative working time. But what else was in that book that you can bring to mind? That
I think it was just how to order your day. I remember just how to prioritize. I think is there a euphemism there, which is like the rocks and the pebbles, and focus on the rocks first, and then the pebbles will come after. Maybe that's some other marketing / business jargon, but I just remember it helping me to realign kind of my priorities for the day, every day, each day.
Right. So let's go a bit deeper. If you had a digital media budget of 10 million quid to get any message out there, what would it be? And it can't be for TanSafe.
Any message out there.
So this can be like self-help. This can be, this could be a motto that you live your life by, or it could be the hashtag to the Forest Gate Dads WhatsApp group chat.
The dark social of the Forest Gate Dads. £1 million just on dark social. Not sure the cost per acquisition on that, given the WhatsApp limits you to 300 people per group, I think, or something like that. For me, it would be about, actually, how could we, it's quite a lofty ambition, but how could you, democratise the current inequality that we see in the world?
How would you do that with a billboard?
I think through storytelling. I think it's still one of the great human kind of. I think it's actually one of the great human elements that we have that's still sacred, that tech hasn't taken over, is storytelling. You've got obviously AI creating AI music, but I don't think there's an AI that can actually create yet a really compelling story based on human emotion. And I think hopefully there are still some things that are very sacred that technology can't touch or can't interpret. I could be wrong when the not the anomaly, the singularity happens.
The creative singularity.
But then again, who knew we'd have self-driving cars and
So it's one of my bugbears about marketing is storytelling. It's a very easy thing to say in an agency. It's a very easy thing to say at a conference, and potentially also on a podcast.
Definitely.
But I don't really feel I've ever seen that many examples of actual storytelling in marketing. And certainly how many examples of storytelling in marketing that have been good. So I'll go with you on the tech hasn't overtaken storytelling. That's a lovely quote. But what are the examples of storytelling in marketing that you think are really successful? I
don't think it needs to be storytelling about the latest campaign that you're launching, But I think brands that can tell their actual story, their actual heritage, that's what I find really, really interesting. The story of Absolut is actually a super interesting one. A guy called Lars Olsen-Smith in 1870. I think it was 1813, and he was only 15 years old. He was already the kind of king of vodka in Sweden. He basically worked out how you could make vodka through continuous distillation, and it was actually a really safe vodka, because it was absolutely pure because of the continuous distillation versus the other vodka that was out on the market, which was effectively rocket fuel and killing people. And that allowed him to effectively take 2/3 of the overall vodka market within Sweden. And then the Swedish government then banned him, and then he found a little island where the Swedish government didn't have jurisdiction, and then he started selling his vodka from there. And he would pay for this boat to go to the mainland, pick up consumers, drive them to his island for free. They would then purchase the vodka, and then they would go back on the free boat. And that's how the story of Absolut vodka started. It was called Absolut Rent Braven, which is absolutely pure vodka.
Well,
stories like that.
Well, it's a great story, but is that marketing or is that just a good story? Like, I guess I must have been exposed to Absolut marketing since I was at school.
Yeah,
I had no idea about that story, so that hasn't landed or hasn't been told, or
and I think you need the recent storytelling we did was that with the vodka with nothing to hide, because we are the only CO2 neutral distillery. And rather than saying we distill our vodka thousands of times, which is quite a rational product message, we focused on the fact that we're the vodka with nothing to hide. And if you look up the vodka with nothing to hide, you'll see that 20 or so of our distillery workers, as well as people from the marketing and brand department, all got naked in the name of Absolut, because we're a transparent vodka with nothing to hide, including the CEO. So.
Right, were you and your team involved in that? For people listening to this podcast, if they want to find out more.
We weren't, sadly not.
Right, okay, so in terms of your career, what has been the best investment of your time, your energy, or your money?
I think, never getting complacent and always investing in taking time out of the day to read the latest industry news, but also I think people who are at the progressive end of the craft of marketing or the craft of comms, or listening to a TED talk. I think just investing in yourself and actually never always being restless, always staying inquisitive, because I think as you get older throughout your career, there can be a tendency to focus on strategy, focus on obviously running the business, focusing on the kind of long-term aspects. And actually what I try and do is not lose the ability to know what's going on at the coalface, as it were, in terms of what the latest trends in social. Instagram TV is just extended its viewability from 60 seconds now to 2 minutes. The fact that you can now shop Instagram, all these kind of technological innovations, and just really keeping up. And a lot of this comes through my network, speaking to people like you and getting inspired from what you're doing. And I just think it becomes this kind of virtuous circle of just constant learning.
So to get mega specific here, because this is something that really confuses me, and I'm kind of embarrassed to talk about it, but I think you saying take the time to read the industry news every day and work out what's going on, right? Yes, totally agree with you, but how do you do that? Do you have is it all come through your email, or do you have chatbots that ping up industry news from TechCrunch? Do you sit down between 7 or till 8 in the morning? So just tell me specifically how you keep up with the news.
It's mainly through email, mainly through Facebook. Actually, there's a lot of my news work feed. And
so who do you follow on Facebook for industry news?
Well, it'll just be things like The Drum, obviously, but then Wired magazine. Who else? Obviously, kind of Mashable. TechCrunch.
Right, so you're fairly mainstream in.
Fairly mainstream, yeah. Okay. I just find that if I find something within that, then I'll go down the rabbit hole for 15 to 20 minutes and kind of really research that. Recently, you mentioned Mark Adams is a part of the Digital Futures Council at Cannes, they had a whole session and a whole conference for 2 days built around blockchain and all of the kind of different aspects of that. And I'd heard about blockchain. In fact, I talked about Bitcoin on my first date with my wife, and she was like, "What the hell is Bitcoin? This guy's really interesting." So, guys, if you're out there, if you talk tech, it can lead to getting married, and and just following that. But the actual technology or the concept of blockchain and how it can be applied beyond cryptocurrency and initial coin offerings and ICOs. Is what really fascinates me, especially when I know you've had people on this podcast talk about it. And previously, in terms of the transparency of media and how blockchain can help look at the actual value chain between ad tech, delivery of ads, and creative delivery of ads and tracking of ads, super important in this kind of digital age, especially with brand safety and as we know, brands like I think it was Mars, pulling their advertising from YouTube recently. Brand safety and transparency is definitely top of everyone's list.
So how Pernod using the blockchain and with the benefit of the transparency of media, is that commonplace now across all brands, across the portfolio, or is that an ambition?
It's certainly. I don't know whether it's an ambition or not. I think the problem is people get caught up in the technology, don't we? And we've discussed this before. We've said, the shiny new toy, don't get distracted by it unless it can actually solve your business problems. And actually what we don't realise is that blockchain is actually running loads of everyday things that we use. It's probably running like the Oyster card technology, for example. It's probably running loads of different transport systems. We just don't call it blockchain. It was just called this other piece of tech, which now everyone knows about blockchain. People can apply that term to it. So I think we will always look at technology and actually see, does this benefit us in terms of solving a business problem? Not VR's just come out, what are we going to do in VR? That shouldn't be the way. As I've always said, it shouldn't necessarily be technology first.
Can I ask you a deep and meaningful question here?
Of course you can.
How do you want people to remember your career?
Ooh, it's like what's on your tombstone or something?
Your career tombstone.
I think I've always chosen careers that I can feel passionate. Places to work that I can feel passionate about the products and the brands that I work on. When I first started my career, I worked at PlayStation. I was a huge gamer.
What was your first gig?
That was my first gig. Yeah.
And what was the job?
I joined as a junior product manager. I'd worked in the post room, playing FIFA. Yeah, with the other post boys.
And where was this?
In Golden Square.
What? That was your first job? Was playing FIFA in the post room for PlayStation?
I left university.
That sickeningly doesn't surprise me about you whatsoever.
I left university and I wanted to become a creative.
And what did you study at uni?
Advertising and marketing communications. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I do you know what I knew? It sounds really sad, but I knew from 15 that I wanted to be in advertising and marketing, and the one thing that my dad really helped with was getting me used to having to call up people, calling up HR departments, and I would do a summer placement in an ad agency every summer as a teenager. So I did ones at TPW, I think it was, Abbott Mead Vickers, did one at J. Walter Thompson, then I did another one at AMV like the following year.
Right, so hold on.
Sorry,
so many questions there. So many questions. So we'll get to your summer jobs and your dad in a sec. Let's make a note of that. And you said you realised that at 15.
Because I saw.
Excuse me.
It's all right,
sorry.
I remember seeing.
On these. What? Why? Yeah. Tell me.
It was a program on TV. I think it was The Inside Job or something, and it would focus on people and just interesting people in interesting professions. And the one was about a account manager in an ad agency, and that they were on this fabulous shooting the latest, I don't know what it was, like car commercial, and I thought that looks like a bit of fun.
I don't actually know how old you are, so roughly when was that? Without giving your age away.
Well, no, I'm going to be 40 this year, so
that's right. Okay, you're only ever so slightly my junior. Okay, so yeah, around about the same time. Inside Job, and
I think it was called Inside Job. Yeah, something like that.
And God, do you know what agency it was? Can you think?
God. It may have been J. Walter Thompson, because I think.
Do you know who it was? Was it like Rory Sutherland or something like that?
I wish it was Rory Sutherland. The best story from Rory Sutherland was he was talking about the Eurostar, and I think it was about 5-10 years ago, and they were trying to make the Eurostar like 10 miles an hour faster, so they could fit in an extra 2 trains or something per day. And he said he worked out because it cost millions and billions to get the train to go that faster, adjusting the track or the train or whatever. And I remember him saying that he worked out that you could serve Veuve Clicquot and hire models to serve Veuve Clicquot or champagne to the whole train for like 2 years for the same cost. Which would you rather have? Would you rather arrive 20 minutes later or have 1 extra train per year? Would you rather be served champagne? I thought it was great story.
So you decided at 15 that's the job I want to do. And your dad, what did your dad do to have the vision to make sure you went and did a summer job at these agencies?
Well, he just knew that I just said to him, I would really like to do this, but I don't know where to start. And he's like, right, well, I think he was a member of the Croydon Chamber of Commerce, and there was this guy called Roy Top, and he had been in the ad business, and he knew a guy called Michael Bulk at AMV, and so we contacted him. But I actually, in the end, he just found out the HR contact, right. And I contacted them directly and got on their summer program, and then I got used to that, and I just made a list of every single ad agency, every single telephone number, and then I literally sat in the dining room and I had a list, and my dad said, right, work your way through the list, get the contact, and then we'll type up a letter, send it off, and that's how I got my work experience.
And you hustled your way in. So you were. So then, how did PlayStation come about?
So I
you were a gamer.
So yeah, I was a massive gamer. Graduated from university. Wanted.
And what
to
was a
become
massive game on PlayStation in 2001?
Well, PlayStation thought with like Tekken, so literally bringing the arcade into your house.
Yeah.
Road Rage. It's Road Rage. I think it's one of that. And obviously Tomb Raider. The classics.
Right.
But I was definitely like Super NES territory. Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Bomberman, Mario Kart, old school. Yeah, and actually it's come full circle because I got one of those mini Super NESs for Christmas with like 200 games in it, whatever it is.
Wow.
And that was a nice nostalgic hit.
And what did he go for? As soon as you turned that on, what game did he go for?
Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
Because we're very different, because all my friends had those consoles and those games, but my parents weren't into me being into that, and consequently I got into Cat Stevens and playing acoustic guitar.
Well, you channeled your energies into something else as well.
Yeah, revisiting some of that music, it's kind of a bit weird. Right, okay, so less about me. I'm assuming you're going to say that never happens to me, but when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, how do you get back on track?
I try and focus on what the kind of three. I think you can only really focus on 3 kind of big goals at any one time. And if the situation is overwhelming or stressful, as times often are, it's like, well, does this affect the 3 things you're trying to achieve in the next 6 months or in the next year? If it doesn't, then actually it's not really worth worrying about, and how can you solve it? And that's what I try and teach my team. It's like, it's not as serious as you think. Take stock, come see me, chat it through. We've all been there.
So let's go into that in a bit of detail. So you can only focus on 3 big goals at any time. So are those 3 big work goals, or do you have 1 personal goal, 1 health goal, 1 work goal, or how does that work for you?
I definitely talk about work here. Yeah, so kind of what are my 3 goals that I need to really kind of establish this year. I mean, on a personal level, I haven't done this in a while, but at the start of a new year, you write yourself 10 things you want to achieve that year. Put that list away and then see how many.
Why haven't you done that in a while? Being a dad?
No, definitely not being a dad. It's not that's got in the way. It's just, I guess I don't need to achieve a list anymore. It's like 1 or 2 things, or 1 or 2, places to go on holiday or visit, or I don't feel the need to write a list now anymore. And
so how do you set your goals? I find this fascinating. So is it you get a goal from your boss and then you go, right, I'm going to reinterpret that in a way that's inspiring for me, or talk me through that process?
There's definitely a cascade of objectives from the top down, so from the CEO downwards. But then of course you have the opportunity, and there's always a great dialogue at Pernod Ricard, which is one of the great things that I love working there. It's a really collaborative environment, really, really great people, kind of entrepreneurial spirit. And I think that allows you to mold those objectives as you go on. Yeah.
Right. So we had quite a big debate about this, but we were like, your shiny new object's going to be this, and then your shiny new object is going to be that.
Yep.
But we sat in my garden, being the FG dads that we are, and we
with baby in hand, no less. No
and
crying whatsoever.
And she hasn't kicked off yet, which is, I may well have to stop this podcast if all hell breaks loose. But it might be interesting in a different way. But what we decided on was the digification of TV, and shame on us for not thinking of a more succinct description of that. But anyway,
its terribleness is its awesomeness.
It's a great get out. So for the people who are listening to this podcast who may not know what the digification of TV is, can you succinctly explain that to them?
Yeah, I think it all started with new media. Obviously with the web, it was the kind of first digification of the original, I guess, digital channel. And slowly, obviously, that's crept into all the other channels. So radio, music, Spotify, press. And, I think everyone was heralding the digital age as the kind of end of TV or the end of press or the end of radio. And actually, yes, if you look at the amount of spend and the circulations, they are going down. But then if you look at the recent headlines, press has had a sudden resurgence. So I think these things do go in cycles. And yes, they kind of lose their kind of big critical mass. And then they subside. But there's still very much a burgeoning industry across all of those channels that have been disrupted by digital. Out of home recently, hugely kind of digitally focused, not only in terms of the inventory, so digital 6 sheets, big 48s, supersized from the likes of kind of like Ocean, JC all of that's being digified, but also the amount of data around that kind of location wise, and the ability to plug in API data, the ability to serve ads when it's hot, when it's cold, when trains might be delayed. All of that has really affected the way that you can kind of plan and buy, and you're moving from just being able to buy panels to maybe a cost per thousand model, which is the same model as you would buy traditionally on the internet when you're kind of buying banners and MPUs, etc. So I think that TV, there's kind of been a big promise, and I guess it really also depends how you define TV, because people watch it on catch-up services like Hulu, VOD, BBC iPlayer, but I think the traditional linear TV has still remained quite linear up until this point, when you've got people like Sky. So I'm not talking about necessarily kind of like Freeview at the moment here, but people like Sky who obviously have an amazing install base. So there's here's an interesting fact for you. When I worked at PlayStation, I'm not sure if it still remains true today, but of any kind of like digital technology, the kind of critical mass is kind of 10 million install base. That's what we always found in the PlayStation days. You'd get to the 10 million mark, or maybe 9.5, and you wouldn't be able to push over it. There would just be this kind of perceptual...
In the UK.
In the UK, yeah. And I think Sky were the first company to break that. And I think that the way they had to do it was actually literally door-to-door salesmen. Had to go back old school in order to kind of tip over that 10 million install base.
So what was that? So in a PlayStation context, so you couldn't, once you'd sold 9.5 million PlayStation whatever,
twos, yeah,
you couldn't then sell any more because there was...
Well, because at that point, then the life cycle of that particular machine is on the wane. Right. And then you're introducing your kind of new platform, which is PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. And so therefore, in terms of life cycles of technology, I think the reason why Sky is there is because you're paying an online, you're paying like a monthly subscription, right? And they upgrade the technology as and when you want. Clearly, there are better boxes out there depending on if you pay extra or whatever, or you get upgraded to the latest box when you spend over a certain amount per month. But yeah, that kind of install base is a kind of constantly managed thing, whereas other install things like HD TVs, for example, probably similar install.
Right. So what are Sky doing that's interesting at this point in time?
I've seen recent developments with those guys that clearly I think TV still builds big brands. I think there's still no other medium out there that provides that kind of stature and that kind of reach, either perceptually or, numbers driven. But I think it's the interesting way that they're starting to blend the kind of more linear old school TV with the new digital technologies that the install base of those boxes provide, but then also being a media owner themselves. So they've got two products, I think Sky Advance and Sky Ad Smart. And one of them is, the physical boxes, and they have data on people that have those boxes. That then allows them to target your audience specifically to those boxes. And, traditionally, linear TV is obviously bought on a TVR basis, so television ratings basis. So what is the percentage of audience that is seeing that ad 1+ or 3 times? But the kind of digital boxes that are kind of part of this Ad Smart technology allows you to serve that ad directly to that box and to that particular household. Now, clearly, households are made up of many demographics, but it's likely that you'll still be able to find your audience there through the specific programming. So if you wanted to target, kind of your average lad, age 25 to 44, through the program like Billions, you can. And that's actually bought on an impression basis. So that's a really interesting sea change, because you're no longer buying on a TVRs, you're buying on impressions, because it's kind of using that kind of digital language in the way it's bought. And the first question you might ask, well, people fast forward through the ads. Well, actually, much like you might buy, YouTube inventory on a cost per view, or a guaranteed view, be that 1 second, be that 3 seconds or longer. They say they'll only count an impression if someone's watched 70% of your ad. So again, that starts to counteract that whole, people just fast forwarding through the ads during the ad break. And then what's really interesting is you can then take that audience and then find looky-likey audiences, or indeed the same audience, online through mobile and video there. So I just think it's a really, really nice consumer journey model. Obviously, this comes with a huge caveat in terms of making sure that the content and the advertising that you're utilizing on these platforms actually engages and excites consumers and takes advantage of that consumer journey, rather than just trying to follow them around with the same message. I know we keep saying, the right message at the right time to the right audience, but it definitely rings true. And you've got to ensure that you're just not annoying people. It's got to be relevant, and it's got to be timely, and it's got to be engaging.
So there's some interesting stuff here. One of the kind of golden rules in social, that in terms of video, that defines it against TV, is that with TV there's always like a payoff at the end of the ad. There's whatever. Whereas social, if it isn't in the first 0.3 microseconds, then it's toast. And if you're paying for an impression or a view or a 70%, then you're much more dragging TV towards the social model, which is you've got to nail it early on. Are you finding that your creative briefs are changing to cope with that?
Yeah, definitely. And you know what? I think for me, it's no longer about, I write the brief, I pass it over to the agency, and, off you go. It's so much, it has to be a collaboration. The agency doesn't know much about your brand, and you don't know as much about the creative process and what happens their end. And so it really has to be a meeting of minds. I still think there's a big place for linear TV with the big payoff at the end, though, because that's the way that people, when they're sat down, are watching TV, and they expect it within that format. Where you've got this crossover, I agree. All the research points to getting your branding in within the first 3 seconds, and that definitely reigns true. Now, does that have to be a big logo flashed up as a super? Absolutely not. And actually, what you have to do is think about the ad and think about how would you work in branding that it feels natural, but you also recognize and you have a prompted awareness of that ad when you see it. Okay, I see that's an ad for Absolute. I see that's an ad for Jameson. And then obviously, yes, you're right. When you get into the kind of social and the online world, not only does it need to be good branding up front, but also if people are watching with the sound off, how are you going to tackle that? Is that with subtitles? Is that with cleverly placed supers? It definitely changes the creative brief, and actually how you're going to plan that piece of content and how you can split it up modularly to fit vertical video for Instagram stories, 6-second teaser pre-rolls, and then maybe cut downs of that, like 10 seconds of retargeting after they've seen the main format. So it's definitely a lot more complicated than it used to be.
So we're going to come back to that detail in a second, but I'm really interested in something that you said earlier on. You said TV still builds big brands, right? And you are in an absolute position of authority to say that. And then you said something after that really struck with me. You said, it's because of TV's stature and reach. Can you tell me more about that statement? Because I'm coming from a skeptical point of view, because I've only ever worked in digital.
Yeah.
Majority of my career has been in social. And for someone who hasn't had a TV in, the best part of 20 years, what do you mean by stature and reach? And I do apologise if I've missed something obvious.
No, not at all. It could just be a generational thing, but I don't think it is, and I'll touch on that in a moment. I think generationally, yes, you and I, we grew up with TV. You'd always see the kind of big boys advertising on TV, and if you read Byron Sharp, how brands grow, that he says you need to hit everyone within the category, not just the kind of the brand category that you sit within. It's not just the vodka category; it is the drinks category. And by hitting people in that, you're kind of reminded them becoming a top of mind brand. But stature of TV, if you get it right. So, for example, I hate to mention the Love Island word, but it proves that for a Generation Z or millennial audience, whatever you want to call it, that there are still opportunities where people will sit down and they will watch a linear TV program and probably the advertising associated around that. Of course, there's the kind of the spin-off afterwards where you can watch behind the scenes and catch up with them on the equivalent of whatever it is, Little Brother's Big Brother, that same equivalent. I think it's called like Love Island After Sun, obviously.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that then, of course, video on demand and the kind of digital aspects which you're obviously a native of start to take their part, and it's that really interesting again blend of traditional linear TV, traditional ad spots around that. And then the digital spin-offs around that property. So
it was interesting to hear you list out all the different types of TV, whether that's the right expression, that you need to make, whether it's a 60-30 or a 15, and then you were talking about the pre-rolls and the vertical video. So how does that work creatively with your agency? Do you brief in a big creative idea or a creative platform and then agree on that, and then they come back with all the different versions? How are you solving that problem, and how are you making sure that the brand message is coming through as strongly across all of those channels, because they all have different needs, different lengths and formats and so on?
Yeah, still starts with a consumer insight, to give them the platform to kind of take that and create that creative platform off that consumer insight. But one of the things we've been experimenting with lately, which has worked really well, we have specialists within our team at Pernod. So we have social team, social media managers. We also have a digital media manager as well. And actually, when we brief the agencies, we actually ask them to be part of the response team. So they actually work with people within the agency. And this is not just trying to kind of be a second eye in the room. Is actually to be part of the response team and say, because they can really feed in what we want as a client, how we think, what would be right for the brand, what wouldn't be right for the brand. So when you get to that initial tissue session, you've already got like 1, 2, 3 routes that they think might work. It's a careful balance, obviously, when the agency involves them. It's not maybe in the first meetup, but it might be in the second or third meetup before they might have the tissue meeting with us, for example. And then once we kind of choose that route and the full response gets worked up over 2 or 3 weeks, and then gets presented back, we know that there's been feedback included and kind of thoughts included as to what might work. So you get to great a lot quicker and a lot better, I think.
And so how are because I'm out of agency land now, as you know, so how are agencies coping with this complexity? Is it something they're embracing? I'm sure they say they're embracing it, obviously, but do you feel that the industry really wants to kind of revert back to type and just focus on TV, or do you think that agencies are starting to accept the fact that social has an equal power to TV.
Oh yeah, absolutely has an equal power. And actually, agencies which are set up to deliver, again, agency structures that are only up there to deliver a press ad, a TV ad, and some out of home, adapting your press ad for out of home. That's just not where it's at. I think that's the quandary that a lot of agencies are probably wrestling with, is they've kind of been set up in this kind of like legacy model, and actually that structure doesn't benefit what clients want. And then how do you kind of move the big oil tanker around? How do you change? And for a lot of agency networks, it's through acquisitions of kind of more agile outfits to kind of give them that skill set. And other times it's just people kind of cutting out the middlemen, isn't it? You've got companies like MoFilm, for example. If you have Rebecca over at MoFilm, I think it's a fantastic proposition. It's very cool. You're effectively just going directly to the production companies and the creators that work for the production companies.
So what are the what was that term? The digitization.
Digification.
Sorry, I'll get it eventually. What are the creative opportunities that you think that we haven't responded to in the right way yet? So I think that you've painted a really interesting broad picture of all the different type of formats you need, and targeting different audiences based on the kind of programming that they watch and how we can target second screen and all the rest of it. But where do you want to go creatively? What are the opportunities for your brands moving forward with these technologies like Sky Advance and Sky AdSmart?
I think it's like you say, telling. I know it goes back to maybe storytelling again, but if you've got a compelling story to tell, how can you tell that across multiple mediums and actually use that medium to the best of it, because the advantage that medium provides you. And I think that's always been the great creative challenge, and one which is I hope agencies like taking on, is that you've got a vertical video or an Instagram story, vertical static, and you've got sequential of 4 different images with 4 different pieces of copy. How are you going to get across the same story or a different aspect of that story within that medium versus maybe the more traditional ad format of a pre-roll video on demand or the 30-second TV ad? I think it actually allows creative directors, hopefully, in the creative teams to, there's always a tendency, this is we've got a 30-second cut, but we also want this 60-second. Well, actually now, you can run that 60-second and it'll be online. Or we've got this really good idea for the way that this could work, but it doesn't really fit a 30-second and it doesn't really fit a 60. You're like, well, you've got Instagram stories for that. So actually, I think it allows you to be even more creative and gives you more creative possibilities. I think the problem therefore comes is like, are there too many possibilities and can you fulfill them all? But I think if you've got a really strong story based off a really compelling consumer insight and where you want your brand to go, then I think those mediums become just a bigger palette from which to kind of tell that story.
So I'm going to wrap this up slowly, and I'm going to go over the millions of different fascinating points that you said, and I think that all of this kind of ties really nicely back together to this quote you said at the start. You said you're a marketer that you blend culture and technology, which I think is probably something I'll quote another time. And you have this bow tie model, so no matter how niche your technology is, as long as you're exploding the impact of the use of that technology to a greater extent of what came in, that is good. I think that a lot of marketers and a lot of people in this industry talk a lot about what brands should do and what brands could do, especially people at agencies, and very rarely do they actually do anything. But you've actually set up your own spin-off business called TanSafe. You've got a URL for that?
Beachsafes.co.uk.
Beachsafes.co.uk.
Yeah, it's available on Firebox and places like that already. So,
and I think that's you've proved that you can do it yourself, which I think is brilliant. And you've yanked me back onto storytelling, which is fair enough. But I think I love that. That's a really great point, that tech hasn't overtaken storytelling. Technology hasn't come up with anything remotely more interesting than storytelling. there's an AI can't tell a compelling or emotional story. It can tell a terrible story, but definitely not an emotional one. It was good to hear a bit more about Absolute and getting naked for the brand. It's quite interesting. But your mindset of never getting complacent, easy to say, hard to do. And thanks for going into a bit of detail about how you read the news. It's such a simple thing to do.
And we're not perfect, It's you have days and weeks where we don't catch up because you simply just don't have time. But as long as you kind of have that as a kind of inner guide, then I think you can't go far wrong.
And you have a very humbling view of, as you get older, it's comfortable to get dragged into the big picture, lofty strategic discussions and decisions. But unless you have a kind of working knowledge of some of this stuff or understand the nuances, then it's easy to get left behind. And we'll find out about this off air, but in fact, you talked about Bitcoin on your first date with your wife, who I haven't met yet, but I'm definitely
going to come around for pizza.
I didn't. The little one was not into that. And blockchain, the transparency of media, I think that's gonna run obviously. And all those lovely stories about you being a kid and having a real vision about what you wanted to do at 15 and watching whatever show it was, The Inside Job on telly, and the fact that you every summer you went and worked at JWT or AMV, it's fantastic. And one of the questions I always ask is, as a young person, what should you do to get into the industry? And you're completely militant about it, and I love that. But you're a gamer geek, and you ended up in PlayStation in the newsroom, just fantastic. And from a goals and perspective angle, you talked about the fact that you should always have 3 big goals at any one time. That's what the Pentagon said, didn't it? The Pentagon said you should have 5 objectives,
military precision,
write them all out, and then cross out the last 2, which I quite like. But you showed a softer side as well. You say to your team that if you're stressing out about something, it's not as serious as you think, and go back to those goals. And I think that's nice to hear about the entrepreneurial spirit at Pernod Ricard. And your shiny new object was the Digification of TV, and that was I didn't know about any of that stuff, so it's brilliant to hear. And I love how the Digification has killed off very few things, and it's cyclical, and press has had a resurgence, and you made such interesting points about digital out of home and the fact that you can now buy based on location and weather, and it's totally changed, and how linear TV is changing with Sky Advance and Ad Smart products, where you can target those people specifically based on their programming. So it's kind of like digital media buying, but on linear TV. And it's interestingly, I can't remember the name of them, but Facebook bought an early stage startup that could basically change static media within TV. So we're in my living room right now, and there's this poster here that what they can do is change the content of that poster. So if we're in whatever TV show, you can buy that poster in the background. So I don't know what they've done with that. But I think that's another digification of TV.
Well, they've already done it in video games, clearly, like Gran Turismo and FIFA, and you can buy the banners on the pitch side and serve that programmatically.
And in real time is a relatively new innovation as well. I
was watching Ready Player One last night, which
was it good?
Disappointing compared to the book. So if you've read the book, I love the book. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I really struggled with the book. The concept, brilliant. The story, pretty good. The writing, it was awful. It was like GCSE.
I hear you on that. But there's a part in the film where they talk about, and we'll be able to, if we lift up Halliday's, because Halliday's kind of like a socialist democratization of the Oasis. And if the evil guys get in, then we'll be able to flood 95% of the head-up display of gamers as their kind of nirvana of advertising in the model. So luckily they didn't succeed.
I thought that was such an interesting wet dream about what VR could be.
Yeah, Second Life.
Basically.
Effectively.
Although they called it Oasis, and Oasis were one of my favourite bands when I was a kid, so I was always my brain would always go to 2 different places. Thinking about Liam and Noel snarling at everyone. But I think one thing you come through to come back to a lot is everything starts with the consumer insight, and that's really rare to hear an innovator talk like that, because most innovation people and myself have been guilty of this. I've been like, well, this is cool, let's do this because it's cool and it's new and it's a shiny new object. But you've stayed true to that throughout the entirety of this podcast, saying that everything starts with a consumer insight, and good on you for saying that. Which pretty much brings us to the end. But if someone listening to this, be that someone who wants to come and work at Pernod, or a kid that just wants to get into the industry, or another brand that wants to reach out to you, how would you like them to do that?
I'd say definitely do your homework. So, really think about the place that you want to work or the brand that you want to work at, and just really, know that inside out. So that offers you, an in terms of a conversation with someone that works there or within the interview process. So often you ask candidates questions about, which brand do you like in the portfolio, or what advertising campaign you've seen that's really made you think twice recently, and a lot of the time they don't come back. And I think if you're going to be getting into marketing advertising, those are the first two things. That have you looked at the social channels, or did you see our last post? A lot of people still don't do those kind of basics, which is unfortunate to see, really, because I'm sure they're brilliant. But yeah, do your homework, and the rest will shine through, really. And just apply application. I probably applied to 35 different ad agencies before I got that one work placement. And it only takes one, and then you can then put that in the next time. Oh, last year I did some work experience at J. Wall Thompson, but I would really like to do here because of X, Y, and Z. And it just starts to show that you've got, I guess, it's the first social proof back in those days when all you had was a fax machine and letters and the phone. And
as I realised the other day, if you work really hard in advertising, by the time you're 40, you can live in a Pebble Dash house in Zone 3.
Living the dream.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks, Tom.